Hello everyone, my name is Jason Parker. Welcome back to this channel about magic. By the way, this is the last of the auditions episodes. Next week begins the judges' cuts. In this episode, we are reacting to a magician duo named the Sentimentalists, who will of course be performing Mentalism. But before we get into that, two things. One, this video for the first time is being recorded in 60 frames per second. Can you tell a difference? Does it matter to you? Does it seem more realistic? Comment below. Second thing, that's right, it's story time. This time we'll go with, oh, I don't know, why not start at the beginning? The beginning. And for those of you following along at home, this is chapter 1. The story is called The Fox and the Grapes. I'm not really sure what the picture of this woman is doing here. In fact, even the next story is called The Goose That Laid the Golden Eggs. She's not holding a goose. The Fox and the Grapes. A hungry fox saw some fine bunches of grapes hanging from a vine that was trained along a high trellis, and did his best to reach them by jumping as high as he could into the air. But it was all in vain, for they were just out of reach. So he gave up on trying and walked away with an air of dignity and unconcern, remarking, "I thought those grapes were ripe, but I see now they are quite sour." So this is the story where that idiom comes from, sour grapes. You've probably heard people use this expression before. Basically, as I interpret it, what it means is that you see something you want, and when you realize you can't have it, you just kind of decide, well, that thing wasn't very good anyway. I guess this is some kind of, what's that word? Cognitive dissonance. It's some way of resolving some pain in your mind, some contradictory thoughts. For example, you could think, that thing is good, and you could think, I deserve good things. But when you realize you can't have it, these ideas are at conflict and they're making you unhappy. So in order to resolve it, you just say, well, those things really aren't good. I deserve good things, but those aren't good, and I'm not worried. So yeah, that's kind of a funny thing. I'm not sure if it's healthy to use this psychologically. I suppose on the one hand, if it makes you happy, it can be a way to protect your ego. But on the other hand, maybe those grapes really were good and you're just lying to yourself. But on the third hand, good is subjective, so what do you think about this story? What do you think about this concept of thinking this way? Comment below.
Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Right, now let's check out this Mentalism duo and see how they perform on America's Got Talent, last of the auditions.
We're gonna have all 4 judges.
No.
Say yes.
No, 3 yes, 1 no.
My name is Mysterion.
And I'm Steffi Kay, and we are the Sentimentalists. From a very young age, I've had a very special connection with my grandmother. She passed away about 10 years before I was born. Even though I never met her, she's found ways to communicate with me. It makes me feel close to her.
I always just had this ability to know what people were gonna do before they do it, and it just creeped them right out. I spent a lot of time alone, but once Steffi and I met one another, I realized that there's somebody else like myself.
When Mysterion and I work together, it magnifies our powers. It kind of feels like taking a test that I didn't study for, but I know all the answers.
It is our dream to take our show and bring it to a stage that is international.
America's Got Talent is one giant leap closer to our biggest dream.
Take it all the way out there, guys.
I like this music. That's a cool intro.
Hello, guys. Tell us your names, please.
My name is Steffi Kay.
And my name's Mysterion.
By the way, I think it's kind of funny that she has the normal name and then his name is Mysterion.
We are mentalists. We like to get into people's minds and essentially mess your heads up.
Good.
And what better a stage than to do it here?
Well, we are here to hopefully see your life change.
You got it.
Let's do it.
Ladies and gentlemen, please draw an image of something simple enough that if you were to think of it, you could transfer it through the air and into Steffi's mind. The audience has done the same, and they're being collected right now. If you could pass down the judges' drawings, and you're going to randomly take one of them out, great.
Okay, wait a second. What's happening? That was a little fast with all the edits and the cuts. So the audience drew a simple shape, and then the judges also drew a simple shape. They collected the audience's drawings into a basket, and now he's taking the judges' drawings, I think. Maybe I need to rewatch that. Maybe I'm an idiot.
1, 2, 3. Her eyes are closed. Steffi, you have an image?
Okay, so I'm sensing something. I think the earth. Did you draw a tree? I see a tree there.
That is in fact the image of a tree. Which judge drew this?
But shouldn't he know which judge drew it? If he's inside of people's minds?
But you know what? I saw this. So we're gonna try it a little different. Up there on stage is a wind machine. And to randomize these, we're gonna drop them into the wind machine, but we're gonna ask for Terry to help us out. Come on out, a big round of applause!
What would you like? Oh, here.
All right, we've brought along a pair of safety goggles.
Okay.
You're gonna go ahead and put those on. I'm gonna dump these in here. All right. Hit it!
Oh!
When you got one, let me know you got one. Amazing, come on out.
Amazing.
Don't let anyone see what it is. In fact, I don't even want to know what it is. But you and I collectively are gonna put that image into her mind.
Okay.
And if Terry, you would just pass me that, making sure it's facing you. You have an image? Okay. What is that an image of, Terry? If you could just say what that is.
It's a heart.
Is a 100% match.
Oh, no! Whoa! That was incredible!
I think a couple people drew this image, but the name of the person who drew this image, Chelsea.
Who is this person who drew the heart? If you would just put your hand up and say hello, Chelsea with a heart.
Chelsea.
Stand up.
There she is, there she is!
That's yours.
She's a real person. Fact.
There it is, that's real! I'll never know. That graph just at random.
Okay, Gabrielle.
All right, before we hear what the judges have to say, let me go ahead and give you my thoughts. My first thought was that the intro was really cool and kind of even spooky with that music. She has this power of being able to connect or communicate with her grandmother, and he has some ability to kind of like, I think he said, know what's in people's heads. But then when the act began, they were out there smiling, kind of excited. It almost felt like the story presented in the intro was like a different story than the people that I'm seeing on the stage right then. Somehow it felt a little bit inconsistent to me. I kind of wish if it was supposed to be mysterious and spooky, they would have kept it that way all throughout. Maybe I'm being too critical. It's just something that I noticed. Also, it seemed like she didn't use her power of communing with her dead grandmother. And if the guy's power is to read into people's minds, why was she the one reading his mind? So somehow I just felt like the whole story wasn't really cohesive. I don't know if it's their fault, the performers, for not thinking it through, or if maybe it was the producers and the editors who had this idea of how they wanted to present the intro on America's Got Talent. Showbiz. What you gonna do? Okay, and as far as the magic itself, one thing I noticed is the woman's ear is covered by her hair, so it's quite possible she has a radio receiver in there and is receiving some intel. In fact, the guy could possibly have some camera system on him, so when he sees the answer up close at the judge's booth, someone receives the image and then speaks into her ear and tells her what it is. That's just some kind of high-tech solution. I don't know if they were really doing that, it's just a guess. Or they could have been doing what Penn and Teller were talking about recently. In Penn and Teller's episode from this week, they titled it Cure the Common Code, and they talked about the code used between magician duos to communicate an idea silently, without the audience knowing. In fact, I reacted to them, and I'm gonna upload that video in a couple of days. I'll put the link up here so you can check it out when I have it available. Anyway, they talk about these codes that mentalists use to communicate thoughts between them. And it's possible they were doing something like that here, because I noticed when that guy was up there at the judge's booth, he looked at the paper and then she knew what it was. So in my mind, it's gotta be one of those two things. Although I kind of feel like a code was not being used because it seemed like she knew the answer pretty quickly and it was a random word. So possibly just cameras and radio receivers, the high-tech solution. And what about the wind chamber with Terry? He was grabbing around there and he grabbed a piece of paper randomly from the audience. One thing that seemed a little suspicious to me is it seemed like all of those pieces of paper were folded up exactly the same way, which seems a little bit unrealistic. My suspicion is that between the time that the audience contributed their ideas to the basket and the basket being dumped into the air chamber, those pieces of paper were switched out. I really think what they could have done to strengthen the act here is if the magician had reached into the booth and plucked out a couple extra ones afterwards and show that they're all different. Because the way it was presented, I was left believing that all the papers had a heart drawn on them. As far as that girl standing up in the audience to prove she's a real person who really contributed to the idea, she could just be a friend. But all of my speculation and my complaining aside, I do have to say that both of these magicians seem like really nice people. I like them and I want to see them do well. Anyway, let's hear what the judges have to say.
I was wowed when you hear the audience reaction. I think everybody was pretty wowed.
There's something like really magical and mysterious about you, and I love the fact that it had to do with love at the very end.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The presentation for me is a little weird. I don't know what it is, but it's a presentation that's more off than what you do.
I'm afraid I'm with Howie on this. I'll tell you why. This was a great introduction to you, but if you want to be at the top, you have to have more imagination. Okay, right, we're going to have to vote. Julianne, what do you think?
Well, I'm gonna say yes.
Gabrielle?
Yes, number 2.
Howie?
For me, it's a no.
Look, guys, I like you. I think what you did is good, but it's got to be great.
Well, this is only the tip of the iceberg.
Well, couldn't we have had the iceberg?
Well, you can't always give the iceberg at the
I have
beginning.
an idea. If you would let me.
You do whatever you want. You know what's going to happen.
Simon.
Yes?
Oh, there's more.
I would like you to think of any celebrity in the history of entertainment.
I've got it.
And I want you to print the name down on that piece of paper. You can use your pen. He doesn't trust the marker. I'll take a peek and look. Keep looking at her.
You picked something from your childhood.
Yes?
Something that you grew up watching, even reading. Lassie.
So Simon.
I knew if I said something critical, you would do something better. You got 3 S's. You're through, well done.
Nice.
Yes, 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 the Sentimentalists. Oh my goodness.
I mean, that was pretty random, right?
Okay, time for the concluding thoughts. I gotta say, that's really cool he was able to convince Simon at the very end to get that 3rd yes and make it through to the next round. I do think they need to step it up a little bit as far as the storytelling goes for the judges' cuts. And I really don't want to be so critical. It's a lot easier to say something bad about an act versus actually going out there on one of these talent shows and getting everything ready and rehearsed and performing it in front of a live audience. So just the fact that they made it and they're performing this show is quite amazing in and of itself. But on the other hand, I kind of feel like the thing he did at the end to convince Simon was kind of just like the same thing he did at the beginning of the act. He had a piece of paper that he saw, and then his counterpart on stage knew what it was. So if it's not some hidden camera he's wearing on him, and if it's not some receiver where she can hear things told to her, then it would really help if they would prove and show that that's not what they're doing. Especially, for example, if she could have her hairstyle where you can see her ears fully. I think that would be a lot more convincing and impressive as far as spectators go. So anyway, I guess we've got a lot of magicians on this season of America's Got Talent. That's at least 4 or 5. I'm kind of losing track now. I'm also doing reactions to Penn and Teller's Fool Us, so you can check out those videos on my homepage here. By the way, on a completely and random, unrelated note, how do you like my new shirt? You know, I lived this traveler vagabond lifestyle with living out of a backpack for a year and a half going around Europe, and when you have to carry your possessions on your back, you end up having very few things. So there's some kind of mental block in place here now that prevents me from acquiring too many material possessions. But I went ahead and decided to get this new shirt, so now instead of 10 shirts, I've got 11. Hashtag, are you impressed? So keep in mind, you've got a lot of things you need to comment below about. 1, how did you like the act? 2, how do you like this video being filmed in 60 frames per second? It's my first time to try publishing one of these, and I'm curious if it feels any different to you. 3, how do you like my new shirt? 4, what did you think about the story from Aesop's fable about sour grapes? In fact, do you know anyone? Do you have a friend or a story you can share below in the comments about someone who is expressing sour grapes syndrome? Maybe it's easier to talk about other people instead of ourselves. Remember to smash like, subscribe, and click the notification bell. And I'll see you next time.
You